She remembered the sound before the pain, steel splitting air, the taste of salt and iron mixing as gravity took command. 1 second she was aboard. The next she was nowhere, swallowed by the Atlantic's cold indifference. Her name was LtCmdr Avery Holt, and the ocean was her interrogator. Breath became currency, time, an enemy. She didn't pray. She calculated oxygen, distance, pulse. Survival was procedure, not mercy. When they found her 3 days later, she wasn't rescued. She was reporting. Some stories start with victory. Hers began with the fall. Watch, listen, and leave your mark below, because this wasn't about who lived. It was about who refused to die quietly. The Atlantic night moved like a machine, cold, unrelenting, and precise. Steel met water in dull repetition, each impact echoing through the hull of the trawler as if counting down to something inevitable. The air was thick with diesel and salt, the smell of corrosion blending with the rhythmic vibration of the engines. Above deck, wind cut through metal rigging and whispered across the dark expanse of sea. Below, in the hold, the world narrowed to confinement and breath. LtCmdr Avery Holt sat bound to a pipe bolted to the deck, knees drawn close, uniform torn. The faint sway of the vessel kept time with her heartbeat, steady, deliberate, controlled. Fear was a function, not a flaw. She measured it, contained it. Every sound above was catalogued: bootsteps crossing, a hatch grinding open, a short burst of laughter in a language she recognized but didn't understand fully. Observation was her last form of command. The light came from a single overhead bulb swinging with the motion of the waves. It flickered occasionally, casting momentary silhouettes, ropes, barrels, a metal crate stamped with Cyrillic markings. When it swayed away, the darkness pressed close. Absolute. Holt's breathing stayed even. She could feel the ache in her wrists where nylon bit into skin, and beneath that, the deeper pulse of exhaustion. In fragments, memory intruded. The mission brief: a reconnaissance intercept 2 days earlier. A cargo vessel flagged for smuggling operations, not expected to resist. The boarding had been by the book, controlled, procedural, silent. Then the ambush. The ship's crew, not fishermen, but armed operators disguised in grease and coveralls. A single radio burst, then static. Betrayal wasn't loud. It was the absence of expected sound. Water dripped from the ceiling onto her shoulder, cold enough to anchor her back to the present. Somewhere above, a metallic door slammed. Voices rose. The vibration of the deck shifted underfoot. Someone pacing. The word officer cut through the noise, sharp and contemptuous. She didn't need translation for the rest: a decision being argued, her fate discussed. Her training surfaced unbidden: survival, evasion, resistance. Keep posture upright, conserve warmth, regulate breath, expect nothing, prepare for everything. But beneath the procedure was something quieter. The realization that discipline wasn't just armor, it was identity. Even here, bound in the dark, she was still an officer of the United States Navy. That title carried its own form of light. The voices returned, closer this time, sharper, decisive. Footsteps descended the ladder, the hatch closed, sealing out the night. The hold compressed around her as 2 shadows approached. One carried a lantern. Its beam found her face. Unforgiving. No words, just inspection, calculation. The other gestured toward the open hatch above, toward the black shape of the sea. The decision was final. Holt exhaled once, slowly. Her pulse slowed to match the rhythm of the ship. Fear reduced to mathematics: oxygen, time, distance. When they lifted her by the arms, she didn't resist. Her body moved where it was directed. Each step memorized. 5 up the ladder, 3 across the deck. The air hit colder now, clean but merciless. Wind tore across her face, pulling strands of hair into her eyes. The horizon was invisible, swallowed by fog and salt spray. She glanced once toward the ship's bow, instinctively mapping bearings, the habit of command refusing to die. Somewhere beneath her sleeve, pressed against her skin, the small brass compass she had carried through every deployment shifted loose. A token, once belonging to her father, a navigator before her. The edge of it cut faintly against her wrist as if reminding her orientation matters, even when the stars are gone. The men lifted. No sound came from her lips. Only the thrum of the trawler's engine and the hiss of wind filled the moment. Then weightlessness. The sea accepted her like an executioner's breath, cold, complete, soundless. The surface broke above her in fractured light, and for a second she saw the compass tumbling free, spinning end over end into the abyss. Then silence, deep and absolute. Discipline replaced fear. Her hands moved instinctively toward the lightless surface, lungs burning, mind counting, direction uncertain. Above, the trawler faded into shadow. Below, the current began to take her. The compass was gone, but she was still moving. The ocean closed over her like a door. The noise of the world vanished in an instant. No shouts, no engines, only the thick pressure of water sealing out everything human. The cold hit first, then the weight. Darkness swallowed form and direction, leaving only the vibration of her heartbeat echoing through her chest. She had fallen from order into absence. Avery Holt's body reacted before thought could catch up. Limbs kicked in reflexive bursts against the pressure, arms slicing upward toward nothing visible. Training overtook panic control the breath, control the body, control the mind. Panic burns oxygen. Discipline extends it. Her lungs screamed for air, but she knew what came next, the narrowing of focus, the mechanical calm that had been drilled into her since the first day of dive qualification. She counted. Slow, deliberate intervals. Movement matched to rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Hands found the release buckle at her shoulder, still bound. She rolled her wrists, flexed against the nylon, ignoring the sting of torn skin. The salt bit into open flesh, sharp as electricity. She reached down, finding the dive knife strapped to her calf. Regulation steel, dull from time, but enough. The knife caught faint glimmers from above, refracted light, far away. She worked methodically, sawing through restraint without haste. Each motion was silent precision, no wasted energy. The fibers gave way in thin threads. When the final strand split, the freedom was almost imperceptible, just less pressure on the skin. One fraction of control regained in an environment that devoured control entirely. She turned, orienting by instinct. There was no up or down here, only gradients of black. Her chest convulsed, lungs tightened. The body begged to breathe, to surrender. Holt forced her mind into procedural cadence. Exhale small bubbles. Watch direction of rise. Tiny spheres spiraled upward, marking escape vector through the void. Then she saw it, a faint shape sinking below her. Brass glint, spinning, tumbling end over end. The compass. For a moment, her body angled downward, chasing instinct, chasing memory. That small circle of metal had survived every deployment, every storm. But even through the blur of cold and loss, logic surfaced. Chasing it meant descent. Descent meant death. Her fingers opened. The light from it faded, swallowed by distance. In that moment, something shifted. Not defeat, but release. The compass had always pointed outward. Now, for the first time, direction had to come from within. Her movement slowed, refined. She turned upward, following the thread of bubbles. Pressure clawed at her ears, her ribs. Every meter up felt like a mile. Muscles burned from lactic acid, the familiar ache of exertion stripped of adrenaline. Time distorted. Her body was data oxygen depletion, temperature drop, hypoxia threshold, but beneath calculation was faith, not in rescue, but in process. Training was faith in motion. Light returned in faint gradients. Not color, but suggestion. A diffuse gray began to replace the black. Above. She imagined the surface, imagined air, the sound of wind. Each thought was a small act of rebellion against the deep. Her limbs moved slower now, fatigue settling in with precision. She paused once, conserving energy, floating still among particles of silt. The sea pressed in on her from all directions, indifferent and endless. Somewhere far above, waves broke, but their sound never reached this far down. She was entirely alone, not abandoned, but suspended in a place beyond judgment. Her vision pulsed, contracting to a tunnel of dim light. The knife drifted from her hand. Mission over, survival left. She kicked one last time, slower, more deliberate. The burn in her lungs became lightheadedness, then silence, then the body's final warning, then rupture. Air broke across her face like impact. She gasped, coughed salt and pain, every sound amplified by the open night. The surface rippled beneath the starlight, metallic, indifferent. She rolled onto her back, drawing air in shallow gulps, eyes fixed on the endless horizon. Above her, the stars spread out, steady, unmoving, celestial bearings. The trawler was gone. Only darkness and the slow motion of waves surrounded her. Her uniform clung heavy, weighted with seawater. She tore away what she could, regulating movement, drifting on her back. The cold was no longer shock. It was environment. She checked her bearings instinctively, eyes searching for any anomaly against the horizon. Then she saw it. A faint pulse of orange to the east, low and distant. A flare, dissolving into cloud, a mark of human presence, of possibility. Her muscles trembled as she angled her body toward it. Every stroke was measured, conserving energy, breathing stabilized, each inhale controlled through grit and rhythm. There was no sound but water breaking around her shoulders, no light but stars in that fading flare. As she swam, her thoughts fell into cadence. Discipline replaces fear. Each repetition became prayer, each breath a decision. The compass was gone, but she moved anyway. Through the dark, through exhaustion, through memory. Somewhere ahead lay the next act, the signal, the chance of survival. Behind her, the ocean closed its surface again, quiet and infinite. The night was still. The current carried her forward. Dawn arrived as a whisper, a thin line of gold cutting across the steel horizon. The Atlantic stretched infinite and indifferent, each wave folding into the next with the slow patience of something that had seen everything and remembered nothing. LtCmdr Avery Holt floated in its stillness, caught between exhaustion and instinct. Her body drifted with the current, wrapped in the salt crust of a night survived by calculation and will. The cold had settled deep into her core, less sensation now than fact. Her fingers no longer trembled. They had gone beyond that. Her heartbeat had slowed into something metronomic, almost mechanical, the body preserving itself through efficiency, the mind refusing surrender. The water lapped against her collar, rhythm steady as a clock. Above, a pale sky began to emerge, colorless and calm. She blinked into the light, trying to focus. The horizon wavered, blurred by the glare of early sun. For a long moment, there was nothing, only sea and sky. Then, a sound, a distant thump carried by wind, rhythmic and faint, almost mistaken for imagination. But Holt knew that sound. Every rotor pulse carried familiarity. It wasn't the ocean speaking, it was machinery, human and alive. The Seahawk. Her eyes lifted toward the direction of the sound, scanning through light and haze. It appeared first as a shape on the far edge of perception, a speck against the growing dawn. The thrum deepened, low, rolling vibrations cutting through the open air. For an instant, her pulse matched it, synchronizing with purpose. Adrenaline rose, slow and deliberate, the way it does when training overrides weakness. She adjusted her position, rolling onto her stomach with effort, every movement scraping against fatigue. The salt water tore at the cuts on her wrists, but pain was distant now, data to acknowledge, not feel. She raised her arm, hand breaking the surface, movement small but precise. One flare, if she could reach it. She remembered its weight on her vest. Emergency signal, sealed and waterproof. Her fingers found it by touch, half numb, fumbling against fabric and buckle. When she freed it, the cold bit deep enough to make her breath catch. She aimed it upward, a motion slow and deliberate. The flare hissed, alive, splitting the dawn with violent color, red against blue, a single defiance against vastness. The aircraft altered course. The sound of rotors shifted, grew louder. Spray lifted off the waves as the Seahawk closed distance, the ocean flattening beneath its downwash. Her body rocked in the turbulence, but she held steady. The flare sputtered and died, leaving smoke drifting into the wind. She could see faces now, helmets, visors, the shape of a crew leaning from the open bay. A rescue swimmer dropped, a dark figure descending through mist and spray. Holt's body felt detached, her pulse fading into background rhythm. Still, her mind was awake, sharp, focused, operational. When the swimmer reached her, she didn't cling. She assisted, instinctively positioning for lift. Her grip was methodical, not desperate. They rose together through the chaos of spray and noise, the world exploding in rotor wash and sun glare. The Seahawk swallowed her into its metallic interior. Warm air hit like shock. Hands moved fast, gloves, straps, voices layered with urgency. Oxygen mask pressed against her face. Medics worked in procedural rhythm, assessing pulse, vitals, lacerations. Through the blur, Holt's eyes fixed on the navigation console glowing across the cabin. She could see the map, the coordinates still marked from last transmission. Incomplete. Her lips moved beneath the mask. Words emerged, steady despite tremor. Mission data. Bearings. Last known vector of the trawler. The medic hesitated, then leaned closer, catching the details, even half-conscious. She was issuing coordinates, her tone calm, almost detached. Discipline didn't leave with injury, it persisted through will. Her fingers lifted weakly toward the console, tracing a correction, new coordinates, recalculated from drift. The crew chief glanced back, uncertain, until recognition set in. This wasn't a victim, this was command reasserting itself. The Seahawk banked east, wind battered the open door, and the world outside glowed white and gold, morning fully born now. Holt lay back against the stretcher, eyes open to the light. The mask hissed with every inhale. Around her, the hum of instruments replaced the pulse of the sea. Somewhere below, the compass rested on the ocean floor, forgotten metal turning in current. Up here, she gave direction without it. The narrator's voice would remember this moment as quiet rebirth. The instant survival became mission again. Leadership wasn't loud. It was the refusal to fade when the body demands surrender. As the Seahawk cut east toward the rising sun, Holt's gaze locked forward, steady, unflinching. The mission wasn't over. It had simply changed shape. Beneath the Atlantic, the USS Montpellier moved like a shadow made of steel. Its hull cut through dark water without a sound, pressure shifting across the surface like breath through lungs. Inside, red light washed over the narrow corridors, a world of quiet urgency where every sound had weight and purpose. Sonar pings pulsed at precise intervals, a heartbeat in the deep. In the operations room, LtCmdr Avery Holt stood with one hand resting on the chart table. The light painted her features in tones of blood and iron. Her body still carried the signs of recovery, gauze along her wrists, faint bruises at the collar, but her posture was absolute. Around her, sailors moved with subdued efficiency, glancing her way, not from curiosity, but from the unspoken recognition that command had returned to its rightful center. The display before her showed the marked grid of the North Atlantic shipping lane. At its center, a freighter's transponder signal. The same ship where she had nearly drowned, now moving south by southeast, masked under falsified registry. The same deck, the same corridors, the same sound of steel under current. No words were wasted. Her voice was steady, quiet, the tone of practiced restraint. Orders flowed down the chain with precision. Lieutenant Colton Rains, leading the SEAL detachment, met her gaze across the compartment. There was understanding between them, the kind forged in service, sharpened by loss. At 0300 hours, the briefing concluded. The plan was exact SDV launch under low moonlight, ingress from starboard aft, silent boarding within 10 minutes. The Montpellier would maintain depth and overwatch, tracking comms and sonar signatures. Holt would coordinate from the submarine's command station, but she had insisted on accompanying the strike team. A decision cleared through channels but met with quiet disbelief. She wasn't returning as a casualty, she was returning as command. The preparation sequence began. SEALs loaded gear and practiced rhythm. Magazines checked, blades strapped, comms tested under red light. Breathing systems hissed in quiet synchronization. The SDV, a dark machine shaped like a torpedo, waited in the flooded bay, its surface slick with condensation, interior humming low. Avery watched as they boarded, then followed, her movements measured, deliberate. Pain lived in the background, a constant but contained reminder of cost. As the bay doors opened, black water surged inward, cold light glinting off metal. The ocean accepted them in silence. The SDV slipped from the submarine's hold, descending into the ink of the deep. The world above vanished. Around them, bioluminescence flickered, faint trails like ghost stars marking their passage. Holt sat behind Rains, headset steady, eyes locked on the dim readout showing distance to target 1,200 yards. Her pulse matched the hum of the motor, a low, continuous vibration through the dark. They rose beneath the hull of the freighter 20 minutes later. The ship loomed above, massive and rusted, its lights shrouded by mist. Holt could feel the reverberation of engines through the water, the same mechanical heartbeat she'd memorized in captivity. She waited for fear, but it didn't come. Only focus. The SEALs surfaced first, quiet as shadows. Grapnels anchored. Ropes tightened. Within moments, they were climbing, wet silhouettes against steel. Holt followed, hands sure, boots finding rhythm. At the rail, she paused, scanning the deck, her memory overlaid perfectly. She knew every corridor, every access hatch. Her mind rebuilt the ship in silence, a tactical map drawn from survival itself. They moved through the interior in formation, suppressed rifles ready. Lights dimmed. The corridors smelled of diesel and brine, just as before. The same hold, the same flickering bulbs. She passed the section where she'd been kept, the pipe still rusted, rope remnants still coiled nearby. She didn't slow, didn't look twice. The past was no longer enemy. It was terrain. The operation unfolded with textbook precision. Targets were isolated, neutralized, restrained. No chaos, no shouts, only the methodical efficiency of trained hands reclaiming order from disorder. The ship's bridge fell last, secured within 6 minutes. Holt entered last. The captain, the man who'd ordered her overboard, stood restrained against the console. His eyes searched hers, expecting retribution. But there was none. Her expression was unreadable, composed. She regarded him as one would an equation already solved. The mission wasn't vengeance, it was completion. The deck beneath her feet vibrated with the engines idling low, awaiting orders. Outside, first light bled across the horizon, a band of rose and gray spreading over steel water. She stepped to the bridge window, the air sharp and cold against her face. The sea that had once taken her, now reflected back calm, over the comms. Rains reported all compartments clear. Objective secure. The words carried no triumph, only confirmation. Avery acknowledged with a nod, her gaze never leaving the horizon. The sun crested fully then, gold light slicing through fog, striking the wet metal of the ship and the surface of the ocean below. In the glow, the water looked almost merciful. She reached into her pocket, feeling the absence where the compass used to rest. The weight that had once guided her was gone, yet she didn't reach for it. Orientation no longer required an object. It required composure. As the team secured prisoners and documented cargo, Holt stood silent on the bridge. The camera of memory would freeze this image, a commander restored, motionless against sunrise, uniform soaked and still marked with scars. Leadership didn't demand words, it demanded steadiness. The operation was over before dawn fully broke. The Montpellier surfaced nearby, its hull rising from the deep like something ancient reclaiming breath. From its conning tower, sailors watched the freighter steady under the new light. Justice wasn't a noise or an act of retaliation. It was the quiet recalibration of balance, the restoration of order after chaos. Holt turned from the horizon and descended the ladder to rejoin her team. The light followed her down, reflecting off water still dripping from her sleeves. Somewhere beneath the waves, her compass remained buried in silt, a relic of direction once lost. But on this deck, surrounded by calm and purpose, she no longer needed it. Her eyes met Rains's as they prepared to exfiltrate. No words, just understanding. Above them, the sky cleared, endless, bright, exact. The hum of engines was constant, low, and even. The sound of endurance rather than movement. In the medical bay of the USS Montpellier, sterile light washed over metal and cloth, over stillness earned through violence and control. The air smelled faintly of iodine and salt. Instruments blinked softly in rhythm with a human heartbeat, quiet proof of survival. LtCmdr Avery Holt lay beneath a thin blanket, eyes open, pulse steady. Bandages traced the geography of her recovery, wrist to shoulder, temple to collar. Every motion carried the weight of awareness, not pain. Around her, medics moved with soft precision, their words brief, procedural, unremarkable. They worked inside the calm after impact, where adrenaline had long since drained away and only discipline remained. Her gaze followed the ceiling's fluorescent strip, light without warmth, steady as the sea itself. Outside, she could feel the subtle roll of the submarine cutting through morning current, returning toward home waters. The world beyond the steel hull was beginning again, wind shifting, tide changing, sunlight finding its way back through cloud. On the table beside her, a small tray held the few items recovered from the operation, a patch torn from her sleeve, a data drive sealed in plastic, a pen bent from use, no compass. Its absence no longer felt like loss, only balance restored. She had once measured direction by instrument. Now, she understood it as presence, knowing where she stood, not where the needle pointed. Hours later, the debrief began. The compartment was bare, gray, functional. A recorder light glowed red. Officers seated across from her listened as she delivered the after-action account. Calm, factual, devoid of flourish. Her words were the same rhythm as the sea measured. Unhurried, precise, Coordinates, time, resistance, outcome, nothing more. The mission was complete. Justice achieved through process, not emotion. Between questions, silence lingered, not awkward, but earned. In that silence, the shape of what she had endured took form not in speech, but in composure. Survival had not hardened her, it had refined her. The marks on her skin were less testimony than memory, reminders that endurance was not defiance, but patience held over time. When the debrief ended, she stood, thanked the reviewing officer, and stepped back into the corridor. The light there was warmer. Late morning filtered through the surface. The air smelled faintly of diesel and coffee. The submarine was ascending. Hours later, at Norfolk, the pier was quiet. Crew disembarked in practiced order, the world above moving at civilian pace again. Vehicles, gulls, wind. Holt paused at the top of the gangway before stepping down, eyes adjusting to real sunlight for the first time since the ocean had taken her. She walked to the edge of the pier and stopped. The horizon stretched unbroken, the sea returning to its indifferent calm. The compass was gone, but direction had returned, internal, unshakable. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the water below, fragmented by tide but whole in form. The narrator's voice would close on this image, a leader standing still. No flag raised, no victory declared, just silence, sunlight, and breath. Courage, after all, is not the noise of survival. It is the quiet that follows when everything worth fearing has already passed. What do you do when the noise finally stops? When the mission's done, and all that's left is the echo of what it cost? She stood on that pier, wind cutting through the dawn, the sea flat as glass. No cheers, no victory, just the quiet kind of peace that comes when control wins over chaos. Avery Holt learned that survival isn't strength, it's patience, the kind that outlasts pain, outlasts noise. Maybe you felt that too. Tell me what it taught you. Drop it in the comments. If this story reminded you that calm is its own form of command, subscribe and stay in the fight, and stay in the. Share it with someone who's learned to hold steady when everything shakes, because some wars don't end with explosions. They end with breath. The compass is gone, but direction remains. The horizon's clear. Next transmission is yours.